Judge Elena Morrison's hand froze on the courtroom door handle. The defendant's name on today's docket had hit her like a fist to the chest: Marcus Carter. The man who'd stopped in the pouring rain 3 nights ago. The stranger who'd fixed her car with duct-tape tools and refused payment. The one person who'd shown her genuine kindness when she was vulnerable and alone. Now, she had to decide if he'd spend the next 7 years in prison. She pushed the door open anyway. Because justice wasn't supposed to care about debt, or was it? Drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Elena Morrison's chambers smelled like old law books and the coffee she'd forgotten to drink. She stood at her desk staring down at the case file. She should have recused herself from the moment she'd opened it. But she hadn't. Instead, she'd spent the last 3 nights reviewing every page, every document, every piece of so-called evidence against Marcus Carter. And the more she looked, the angrier she got. "You're making a mistake." The voice came from her doorway. Samuel Garrett, senior judge, her mentor for the last decade. He stepped inside without waiting for permission, closing the door behind him. "I haven't made any decisions yet." "You assigned yourself this case." Morrison recused himself. Someone had to take it. There were 3 other judges available. Samuel's eyes were sharp, knowing. "You specifically requested Carter's case. Why?" Elena met his gaze steadily. "Because Morrison was asleep at the wheel. He denied basic forensic examination because of budget concerns. That's not justice, that's laziness. Or it's efficiency. We have 200 cases backlogged. Spending thousands on document authentication for a landscaping company embezzlement. $47,000 and 7 years of a man's life. The evidence is clear. The evidence is photocopies certified by the plaintiff's own employee. Would you convict on that?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then, "What aren't you telling me?" Everything. She wasn't telling him everything. She wasn't telling him about Highway 52, about the rain that had turned her windshield into a waterfall, about how her battery had died in the middle of nowhere, how her phone had no signal, how she'd stood there in her soaked suit feeling more helpless than she had in 20 years. She wasn't telling him about Marcus Carter pulling over in a car that looked like it might not survive another winter, about how he'd kept his distance, kept his hands visible, spoken gently, like he understood that a woman alone at midnight had every reason to be afraid. She wasn't telling him how Marcus had fixed her battery with tools held together by tape and wire, how he'd refused payment, how he'd said, "If you want to do something nice, do the same for someone else when they need it." She wasn't telling Samuel that she'd looked into Marcus Carter's eyes that night and seen something she'd stopped believing existed in the world: goodness without expectation of reward. "Elena." Samuel's voice was gentle now. "If you have any personal connection to this defendant." "I don't." The lie came out smooth, practiced. She'd been a judge for 12 years. She knew how to control her face, her voice, her body language. "Then why do you look like you're about to walk into battle?" "Because I am. Because somewhere along the way, we started treating defendants like numbers instead of people. And I'm tired of it." Samuel studied her for another long moment, then nodded slowly. "Be careful. Whatever you're doing, be careful. Your career isn't worth one case." But it wasn't just one case. It was Marcus Carter who'd stopped in the rain when he didn't have to. It was his daughter Elena had seen the photo in his file, a 6-year-old named Sophie, with missing front teeth, and a school drawing of a superhero labeled "My Daddy." It was the principle that character should matter more than paperwork. Samuel left, and Elena sat down at her desk, pulling the file toward her again. Marcus Carter, age 43, single father, employed at Brennan Landscaping for 3 years before the alleged embezzlement. No prior criminal record. Not even a parking ticket. Richard Brennan, age 48, owner Brennan Landscaping. 2 previous employees had filed wrongful termination suits, both settled out of court with NDAs attached. That detail alone should have raised red flags. Elena opened her laptop and started reading. Bank statements, email chains, withdrawal forms with Marcus's signature. Accept. She pulled out her magnifying glass, the old-fashioned kind her father had given her when she graduated law school. "Never trust technology alone," he'd said. "Sometimes you need to look closer." She looked closer now. The signatures on the withdrawal forms were identical. Not similar. Identical. Same pen pressure, same loop on the M, same flourish on the final R. People don't sign their name exactly the same way twice. There's always variation, a slight difference in pressure, in angle, and speed. These signatures had been traced, or photocopied and pasted. Elena's jaw clenched. She pulled up the email metadata, something Morrison should have done weeks ago. The emails allegedly sent from Marcus's work account had been sent from an IP address that didn't match any computer in the office. They'd been sent at 3 a.m. when Marcus's time cards showed he'd been clocked out for hours. This wasn't sloppy work. This was a frame job. And Morrison had been too busy, too tired, too overwhelmed to look. But Elena wasn't. The courtroom was packed when she entered. All rise for the Honorable Judge Elena Morrison. She took her seat behind the bench, arranging her files with deliberate calm. Then she looked up. And there he was. Marcus Carter sat at the defense table in a borrowed suit that didn't fit right. His hands clasped so tightly, his knuckles were white. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, worry carved into every line of his face. When he saw her, his eyes went wide. Recognition. Elena kept her expression neutral, professional. She couldn't acknowledge him. Couldn't show any sign that they'd met before. That would be grounds for immediate recusal, and if she recused herself, this case would go to Judge Patterson. Patterson had a 94% conviction rate and zero patience for public defenders. Marcus would be convicted by Friday. So Elena looked away, looked down at her files, and did what she did best, controlled the courtroom. "Mr. Brennan, you may proceed with your opening statement." Richard Brennan stood. He was handsome in that practiced way, silver hair, expensive suit teeth, too white to be natural. The kind of man who'd spent his life learning to lie convincingly. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of theft and betrayal. Marcus Carter was my employee for 3 years. I trusted him with access to company accounts, and over 6 months, he systematically stole $47,000. Elena watched Marcus as Richard spoke. The defendant's jaw was clenched, his eyes fixed on the table. Not the behavior of a guilty man trying to appear innocent. The behavior of an innocent man watching his life be destroyed by lies. The evidence is documented and clear. Bank transfers, email confirmations, signed withdrawal forms. Mr. Carter had means, motive, and opportunity. The prosecution will demonstrate beyond any reasonable doubt that he is guilty of grand theft." Richard sat down looking satisfied. James Flores stood for the defense. Elena had worked with him before. Good lawyer, overworked, fighting battles with one hand tied behind his back because his clients couldn't afford better. "Your Honor, the prosecution's case relies entirely on circumstantial evidence and unverified documents. My client is innocent, and we will prove—" "Mr. Flores," Elena's voice cut through the room. "Before we proceed, I have concerns about the evidence submitted in this case." The courtroom went silent. "Ms. Vance," Elena addressed the prosecutor, "these exhibits you've submitted: bank statements, emails, withdrawal forms. They're all photocopies." Patricia Vance stood smoothly. "Yes, Your Honor. The originals were damaged in an office flood." "When?" "Approximately 4 weeks ago." "How convenient." Elena let the words hang in the air. "And these photocopies were certified by whom?" "By Mr. Brennan's office manager." "So certified by an employee of the plaintiff, not an independent third party." "Your Honor." "And Mr. Flores filed a motion for forensic examination of these documents, which was denied by Judge Morrison due to budget constraints. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor, but—" But nothing, Ms. Vance. Elena leaned forward, her voice sharp. We are not convicting anyone based on photocopies certified by the accuser's own staff. That's not evidence, that's a story. Richard Brennan's face went red. Your Honor, the defense is trying to delay. Mr. Brennan, you are not a lawyer in this courtroom. Sit down. He sat. Elena turned to the court reporter. Let the record show that I am granting the defense's motion for forensic examination of all documents submitted as evidence. This case is continued for 3 weeks pending a full forensic accounting review by an independent expert. Your Honor. Patricia was on her feet again. 3 weeks, Ms. Vance. If your evidence is legitimate, the examination will prove it. If it's not... Elena's eyes moved to Richard Brennan and her voice went cold. Then we'll have a very different conversation about who's committing fraud in this courtroom. The gavel came down. The sound echoed through the silence like a gunshot. Elena gathered her files, stood, and walked toward her chambers without looking back. But she felt Marcus's eyes on her the entire way. She'd just violated 6 judicial ethics rules. She'd revealed bias. She'd attacked the prosecution's case before hearing full testimony. She'd given the defense an advantage based on nothing more than her own suspicions and a debt she could never acknowledge. If anyone discovered the truth that she knew Marcus Carter, that he'd helped her, that she was making decisions influenced by personal obligation, she'd be disbarred. Her career would be over. But as she closed her chamber's door and leaned against it, her heart pounding, Elena knew she'd do it again. Because the alternative was watching an innocent man go to prison while she did nothing. And she'd stopped being able to live with that the moment Marcus Carter had stopped in the rain. Marcus couldn't speak. Flores was talking beside him, explaining what had just happened, what it meant, why this was extraordinary, but Marcus's ears were ringing. Did you see that? She eviscerated their case. I've never seen a judge go after the prosecution like that on day one. Marcus, this is good. This is really good. Marcus nodded mechanically. It was her. It was definitely her. The woman from Highway 52. And she'd just saved his life. Or started to. Marcus! Flores gripped his shoulder. Did you hear me? We have 3 weeks. The forensic accountant will find what we couldn't afford to look for. This changes everything. Why did she do that? Because she's actually doing her job. Because Morrison was lazy and she's not. Because sometimes... Flores paused, his voice softening. Sometimes the system works. Not often, but sometimes. Marcus wanted to believe that, but he'd seen the way Judge Morrison's eyes had flickered toward him for just a second before she'd looked away. He'd seen something there. Recognition, determination, maybe guilt. She knew who he was, and she was risking something to help him. The question was what, and why Richard Brennan stormed past them in the hallway, his face purple with rage, his lawyers trailing behind, trying to calm him down. This is bullshit, Richard snarled. That judge is biased. We'll file a complaint. You'll do nothing. Patricia Vance's voice was low, urgent. She has every right to demand proper evidence authentication. If we push back too hard, it looks like we're hiding something. We're not hiding anything. The lie was so obvious, even Marcus could hear it from 20 feet away. Mr. Carter. A new voice. Marcus turned. A woman in her 30s stood there, Asian professional carrying a briefcase that looked expensive. My name is Lisa Chen. I'm a forensic accountant. Judge Morrison's office contacted me this morning to review your case. This morning, before the hearing. I've reviewed the preliminary documents, Lisa continued. And I have to tell you there are significant irregularities. Digital signatures that don't match authenticated samples. Email metadata that's inconsistent with the timeline. Bank transfers that were initiated from IP addresses outside your workplace. Marcus's chest tightened. So I didn't do it. I can't say that definitively without full access to the original documents and server logs. But what I can say is that the evidence against you is highly suspect. And if I can prove forgery, Lisa's eyes were sharp. Then we're not just talking about your innocence, we're talking about criminal charges against whoever framed you. Richard Brennan. The name burned in Marcus's mind. How long will the investigation take? 2 weeks, maybe less. Judge Morrison fast-tracked the authorization. Usually this process takes months, but she classified your case as urgent due to the defendant's circumstances. Lisa glanced at Flores. She mentioned you have a young daughter who's dependent on you. Sophie, she's 6. Lisa nodded. Judge Morrison emphasized that a wrongful conviction would result in severe harm to a minor child. That carries weight. She's making sure this moves quickly. After Lisa left, Marcus stood in the courthouse hallway, people streaming past him, and tried to process what had just happened. Judge Elena Morrison was fighting for him. Not just doing her job fighting, actively, aggressively in ways that seemed personal. Because he'd stopped to help her on Highway 52. That seemed impossible. People didn't risk their careers for strangers who'd fix their car batteries. But what other explanation was there, Daddy? The voice cut through his thoughts. Sophie came running down the hallway, Mrs. Chen hurrying behind her, looking apologetic. I'm sorry she insisted on coming. She wanted to see... Sophie crashed into Marcus's legs, wrapping her arms around him. Are you coming home? Yeah, baby. I'm coming home. Forever. The question broke his heart. I don't know yet. But today, yes. Today, I'm coming home. Sophie pulled back, her face serious. Mrs. Chen says the judge is fair. Is she fair, Daddy? Marcus looked back toward the courtroom, toward the chambers where Judge Morrison had disappeared. Yeah, sweetheart. I think she is. More than fair. She was brave. She was principled. She was willing to bend rules that deserved to be bent. She was everything he'd thought didn't exist in the system anymore. And somehow, impossibly, she was fighting for him. The question that haunted him all the way home. What happened when the truth came out? When the forensic examination proved his innocence and proved Richard's guilt, would Judge Morrison's intervention look justified? Or would someone ask the wrong questions and discover that the judge and the defendant had met before, that she owed him a debt, that everything she'd done might have been compromised by bias? Marcus held Sophie's hand as they walked to his car, and he prayed that saving his life wouldn't cost Elena Morrison hers. Because he was starting to realize something terrifying. She'd known the risk when she'd pushed that courtroom door open, and she'd done it anyway. For him. The forensic accountant's report arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered to Elena's chambers by courier at 7 a.m. She'd been awake since 4, unable to sleep, her mind cycling through worst-case scenarios. What if the examination found nothing? What if Richard Brennan's forgeries were good enough to pass professional scrutiny? What if she'd risked everything for nothing? Her hands shook slightly as she opened the envelope. Then she started reading, and everything changed. Within 3 pages she knew. Within 5, she was certain. By page 10, she was furious. The signatures were digitally manipulated photocopies. The email metadata showed systematic forgery. The bank transfers had been initiated from Richard Brennan's personal laptop. Then the logs had been altered to make it appear they'd come from Marcus's work computer. It wasn't just embezzlement. It was conspiracy, fraud, forgery, and obstruction of justice. Richard Brennan had stolen $47,000 from his own company, then buried Marcus Carter under an avalanche of fake evidence. And he'd almost gotten away with it. Elena's intercom buzzed. Judge Morrison, Mr. Flores is here. Says it's urgent. Send him in. James Flores entered, looking like he'd run the entire way. His tie was crooked, his briefcase hanging open, papers threatening to spill out. Did you get it? The forensic report? Elena nodded slowly. I got it. And... She slid the document across her desk. Read page 14. The conclusion section. Flores flipped through frantically, then stopped. His eyes widened. Oh my God. Every piece of evidence against Marcus Carter was fabricated. The forensic examination proves it beyond any doubt. We can get the charges dismissed. We can do better than that. Elena's voice was cold. We can make sure Richard Brennan faces criminal charges for what he did. I'm referring this case to the district attorney with a strong recommendation for immediate prosecution. Flores looked up, his eyes shining. Marcus is going to cry. He can barely sleep. His daughter keeps asking if Daddy's going to jail, and he doesn't know what to tell her. Sophie, the 6-year-old in the photograph who'd drawn her father as a superhero. Elena felt something tighten in her chest. Tell Marcus the hearing is scheduled for Thursday, 10 a.m. Tell him to bring Sophie if he wants to. Tell him... She stopped herself before she said too much. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him the system failed him, but I won't. Tell him that stopping on Highway 52 was the most important thing anyone's done for me in years, and I'm paying it back the only way I know how. But she couldn't say any of that. Tell him justice is coming, she finished quietly. Flores gathered the report, his hands gentle like he was holding something precious. Judge Morrison, I've been a public defender for 16 years. I've seen good judges and bad judges and everything in between. But what you did demanding that forensic examination when you had every political reason not to, that's something different. I was doing my job. No. Flores met her eyes steadily. You were doing what the job is supposed to be. There's a difference. After he left, Elena sat alone in her chambers staring at the forensic report. She'd won. Marcus would be exonerated. Richard would face justice. But the victory felt hollow because she knew the truth. She hadn't done this purely for justice. She'd done it because she owed Marcus Carter a debt. Because he'd stopped in the rain when he didn't have to, and she couldn't let an innocent man suffer when she had the power to help. That made every decision she'd made ethically compromised. Samuel Garrett had been right to question her. If anyone ever discovered the connection, if anyone found out that Judge Elena Morrison and defendant Marcus Carter had met before the trial, everything she'd accomplished would be invalidated. Marcus might even face a retrial with a different judge. So she did what she'd been doing for 3 weeks. She buried the truth and hoped it stayed buried. Because sometimes justice required impossible choices, and she'd made hers. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of bright sunshine that felt like mockery when you were waiting for your life to be decided by strangers. Marcus stood outside the courthouse. Sophie's hand gripped tightly in his. She wore her favorite yellow dress, the one she'd picked out herself, insisting that yellow was the color of happiness and today needed to be happy. Is this where the magic happens? Sophie asked, staring up at the building. What magic? Mrs. Chen says judges make magic happen. They fix things that are broken. Marcus's throat tightened. Sometimes they do. Is the judge going to fix you? I'm not broken, baby. But you're sad all the time. That's a kind of broken. Out of the mouths of children. Flores met them at the entrance, looking more confident than Marcus had ever seen him. It's over. The prosecution reviewed the forensic report and they're dropping all charges. Richard Brennan is in custody, arrested this morning on fraud and embezzlement charges. Marcus couldn't breathe. It's over. You're free. Completely, totally free. No conviction, no record, nothing. Your name is cleared. Sophie tugged on Marcus's sleeve. Does that mean Daddy's not sad anymore? Yeah, baby. Daddy's not sad anymore. But he was terrified because he still had to face Judge Morrison. Still had to sit in that courtroom while she looked at him with those knowing eyes and pretend they were strangers. The courtroom was nearly empty this time. Just Marcus Flores, the prosecutor, looking deeply uncomfortable, and a handful of court staff. All rise for the Honorable Judge Elena Morrison. She entered, and Marcus's heart did that same stuttering thing it had done the first time. Recognition. Gratitude. Something else he didn't have words for yet. Judge Morrison took her seat, arranged her files, and looked up. Mr. Carter, please stand. Marcus stood his legs shaking. After careful review of the forensic accounting report and consultation with the district attorney's office, this court finds that all evidence against you was fabricated. The charges of grand theft and embezzlement are hereby dismissed with prejudice. The words washed over Marcus like a wave. Dismissed. With prejudice. Meaning they couldn't bring charges again. Meaning it was really truly over. Furthermore, I am referring this case to the district attorney with a strong recommendation that charges be filed immediately against Richard Brennan for fraud, embezzlement, forgery, and obstruction of justice. Mr. Brennan's deliberate framing of an innocent man represents a serious abuse of the legal system and warrants the strongest possible prosecution. Judge Morrison's eyes met Marcus's for just a fraction of a second, and in that moment, he saw it. Relief, pride, something warm that made his chest ache. Then she looked away, professional mask back in place. Mr. Carter, you are free to go. This court apologizes for the injustice you have suffered. The gavel came down with finality. It was over. Marcus sank back into his chair, his hands covering his face. Flores was saying something, shaking his hand, but Marcus couldn't hear him over the roaring in his ears. Free. He was free. Sophie climbed into his lap, her small arms wrapping around his neck. See? The judge fixed you. She's magic. Magic. Maybe she was. When Marcus finally looked up, Judge Morrison was gone, disappeared into her chambers like she'd never been there at all. He wanted to thank her, needed to thank her. But how could he? How could he approach a judge who'd just exonerated him and say, "Remember me. From the highway, I know you recognized me. I know what you risked." He couldn't. So he gathered Sophie in his arms, shook Flores's hand, and walked out of the courthouse into sunshine that finally felt real. But as he reached his car, he made a decision. He had to see her, had to find a way to say thank you properly, face to face without the courtroom walls between them. Even if it was dangerous. Even if it was foolish. He owed her that much. 6 days passed before Marcus worked up the courage. 6 days of returning to normal life, picking Sophie up from school, without other parents whispering, applying for better jobs, without a pending criminal charge hanging over him, sleeping through the night for the first time in months. 6 days of thinking about Judge Elena Morrison and the debt he could never repay. On the 7th day, he went back to Highway 52. It was stupid. Irrational. The chances of her breaking down in the exact same spot were astronomical. But he drove there anyway, pulling onto the shoulder where her red sedan had been stranded, and he sat there in the darkness, engine idling, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. She'd saved him, not just by doing her job, but by going beyond it, by demanding examination when it would have been easier to just follow the previous judge's ruling, by fighting for him when she had every reason not to get involved. Why a simple act of kindness on a rainy night didn't seem like enough reason to risk a judicial career. People didn't do that. The world didn't work that way. But she had. Headlights appeared in his rearview mirror. Marcus's heart jumped, irrational hope surging through him, but it was just a pickup truck that passed without slowing. He sat there for another 20 minutes feeling foolish before finally driving away. But he came back the next night, and the next. On the 4th night, he was about to give up when he saw them hazard lights. Red. Blinking. Not in the same spot, but close, maybe a quarter-mile down the road. Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. It couldn't be. But he pulled over anyway, his heart hammering, and got out of the car. The woman standing beside the vehicle turned when she heard his footsteps. It wasn't Elena. Of course it wasn't. What had he been thinking? "Sorry to bother you," the woman said. She was older, maybe 60, holding a phone with a cracked screen. "My car just died. Do you know anything about engines?" Marcus almost laughed. The universe had a sense of humor. "A little." "Let me take a look." It was the battery again, different problem, same solution. He tightened the connection, cleaned the terminals, and had her car running in 10 minutes. "How much do I owe you?" she asked, reaching for her purse. Marcus thought about Elena's words. If you want to do something nice, do the same for someone else when they need it. Nothing, he said. Just help someone else when you get the chance. The woman's eyes got wet. You're a good man. Marcus drove home feeling lighter somehow. Maybe this was what Elena had meant. Maybe the debt wasn't about seeing her again. It was about paying it forward. Being the kind of person who stopped, who helped, who made the choice to care, even when it was inconvenient. But 2 weeks later, the universe gave him a different kind of sign. Marcus was restocking shelves at his new job hardware store. Better hours, decent pay, when a voice behind him said, "Excuse me, do you know where I might find battery terminals?" He turned around, and there she was, Elena Morrison. Not in judge's robes, not behind a bench. Just a woman in jeans and a sweater, her hair down, standing in the hardware store with the smallest smile on her face. "It's you," Marcus breathed. "It's me." "Your car is fine. I replaced the battery like you suggested." Her smile widened slightly. "I'm actually here for a different reason." Marcus set down the box of supplies he'd been holding. His hands were shaking. "You recognized me. In the courtroom. You knew the whole time. From the moment I saw your name on the docket. Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you recuse yourself?" Elena glanced around the store. They were alone in this aisle, but voices drifted from nearby sections. "Can we talk somewhere more private?" Marcus led her to the break room in the back, empty this time of day. Just a table, and some chairs, and a coffee maker that hadn't worked in months. Elena sat down, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked uncertain. Vulnerable. "I should have recused myself," she said quietly. "The moment I realized you were the man from Highway 52, I should have stepped aside and let another judge take your case. That's the ethical thing. That's what the rules say." "But you didn't." "No. Because I read your file, Marcus. I saw the evidence or lack of it. I saw photocopies certified by the plaintiff's employee denied forensic examination, a public defender stretched too thin to fight properly. And I knew what would happen if I recused myself. You'd get Judge Patterson, who rubber stamps 94% of prosecutions. You'd be convicted by the end of the week." Marcus's throat was tight. "So you risked your career." "I bent some rules. I pushed harder than I normally would have. I demanded examination that should have been done automatically, but wasn't, because the system is broken and overworked and sometimes lazy." "You did more than that." Marcus's voice was rough. "You fought for me. I saw it in your eyes when you came down with that gavel. You weren't just doing your job, you were making sure I didn't lose my daughter." Elena looked away, and Marcus saw her swallow hard. "Sophie. The 6-year-old who draws superheroes. You remembered. I remember everything about your case. I remember that you worked double shifts to support her. That her mother left when she was a baby. That you're all she has." Elena's eyes came back to his, and they were bright with unshed tears. "I couldn't let the system destroy that. I couldn't watch an innocent man go to prison because the previous judge was too busy to care." "It wasn't just about the system, though, was it?" Marcus said gently. "It was personal, because I stopped on Highway 52. "Yes." The word came out as a whisper. "Because you stopped when you didn't have to. Because you were exhausted and worried and facing trial in 3 weeks, but you helped a stranger anyway. Because you showed me something I'd stopped believing existed: genuine human kindness, with no expectation of reward." They sat in silence for a long moment. "I could lose my position if anyone found out," Elena said finally. "I violated judicial ethics. I had personal contact with a defendant and didn't disclose it. I made decisions that could be seen as biased." "Were they biased?" "I don't know. I'd like to think I would have demanded that forensic examination regardless of our connection. But the truth is, I can't be sure. And that uncertainty haunts me." Marcus reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. "You saved my life. You kept Sophie from growing up in foster care. You proved I was innocent when everyone else had already decided I was guilty. If that's bias, then the system needs more of it. That's not how ethics work. Maybe ethics need to be more human then. Elena laughed short, surprised. That's not a legal argument. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a guy who fixed your battery and got his life back because you cared enough to look closer. And I came here today. I've been coming back to Highway 52 every night for a week because I needed to thank you, properly, without a courtroom between us. You came back to the highway, every night, looking for you, hoping to run into you somehow. It was stupid. It was sweet. Their eyes met and something shifted. Something that had been building since the moment Elena had pushed open that courtroom door, knowing exactly who Marcus Carter was. I can't date you, Elena said, but her voice lacked conviction. It would be inappropriate. You were my defendant. People would question everything. The case is closed, dismissed with prejudice. I'm not your defendant anymore. It's still what? Still risky, still complicated. Marcus smiled slightly. Yeah, it is. But you didn't strike me as someone who backs away from doing the right thing just because it's risky. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then, there's something else, something I haven't told you. Marcus waited. When I was standing on that highway, phone dead, car broken, completely helpless, I was scared. Not just of the situation, of being that vulnerable. I've spent 20 years building a career where I'm always in control, always making the decisions, always the one with power. And in that moment I had none. I was just a woman alone in the dark, hoping someone decent would stop. And I did. You did. And the way you kept your distance, kept your hands visible, spoke gently. You understood something most men don't. You understood that I had every reason to be afraid, and you made yourself less threatening without me having to ask. That meant something. That told me more about your character than any background check ever could. Marcus felt heat behind his eyes. My mother taught me. She said if you want to know what kind of man someone is, watch how they treat people who are vulnerable. People who can't help them back. She was right. Elena's voice was soft. And that's why I couldn't let you be convicted. Not because I owed you a debt, but because the world needs more people like you in it, not locked away in prison. So what happens now? Elena took a breath. Now we're careful. Now we take things slowly. Now we remember that my entire career could be destroyed if someone decides to investigate and finds out we met before your trial. Is it worth the risk? I don't know yet. Ask me again in 6 months. But she was smiling when she said it, and Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. Hope. Real, tangible hope. Can I buy you coffee? He asked. Just coffee. Nothing complicated. Just two people who met under strange circumstances getting to know each other properly. Elena stood, and Marcus stood with her. They were close now, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her eyes, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her. Coffee sounds perfect, she said. But not here. And not anywhere near the courthouse. Somewhere across town where no one knows either of us. Worried about being seen with me. Worried about protecting what we're building. There's a difference. They left through the back entrance of the hardware store, taking separate cars to a small cafe on the opposite side of town. The kind of place that didn't ask questions, where the waitress refilled coffee without making small talk. For 2 hours they talked. Not about the trial, not about Highway 52, but about everything else. Elena told him about growing up with a single father who'd been a civil rights lawyer, about how she'd watched him fight for people who couldn't fight for themselves, about how that had shaped everything she believed about justice. Marcus told her about Sophie, about the challenges of raising a 6-year-old alone, about how his daughter had been the only thing keeping him sane during the trial. She drew me a picture once, Elena said, during one of the preliminary hearings. Your attorney gave it to me. A judge with a superhero cape and a magic hammer. Marcus laughed. She still calls you the Magic Hammer Lady. Told everyone at school about how you saved her daddy. I hope she stops doing that. The fewer people who connect us, the better. She's 6. Discretion isn't her strong suit. Elena smiled, but there was worry behind it. Marcus, you need to understand something. If we do this, if we try to build something real, we have to be smart. No public appearances together. No social media. No paper trail that connects us until enough time has passed that our meeting before the trial is ancient history. How long? A year, maybe 2. Long enough that if someone eventually finds out it looks like a chance meeting after the case closed, not something that influenced my decisions. That's a long time to hide. It is, and I won't blame you if that's too much. If you want something simpler, something easier. I don't want easier. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. I want you. However, we have to make that work. Elena's fingers tightened around his. This could blow up in our faces. I could lose everything I've worked for. Or we could build something worth losing it for. She laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound Marcus had heard in months. That's either very romantic or very naive. Maybe both. They sat there holding hands across a coffee-stained table in a cafe where nobody knew them, and Marcus thought about the strange way life worked. How one broken battery on a rainy night had led to this moment. How one choice to stop, to help, to care, had created a connection that defied logic and ethics, and every rule about how judges and defendants were supposed to interact. I need to go, Elena said, finally reluctantly. I have a sentencing hearing in the morning. When can I see you again? Next Thursday, same place, same time. We'll make this a regular thing, coffee every week, slowly getting to know each other like normal people do. We're not normal people. No. Elena stood, but she didn't let go of his hand yet. We're two people who met under impossible circumstances and are trying to build something real, despite every reason we shouldn't. That's not normal. That's... She paused, searching for the right word. Magic, Marcus suggested, thinking of Sophie. Elena smiled. Yeah, maybe it is. She left first, and Marcus waited 15 minutes before leaving himself, covering their tracks, being careful. But as he drove home, he couldn't stop smiling. Sophie was already asleep when he got back, and Mrs. Chen, the neighbor who watched her in the evenings, reported that she'd been good all night. She's been asking questions, though, Mrs. Chen said as Marcus paid her. About the trial, about you being happy now. She's smart, that one. Notices everything. I know, I'll talk to her. After Mrs. Chen left, Marcus stood in Sophie's doorway watching his daughter sleep. Her nightlight cast stars across the ceiling, the same stars she'd stared at every night during the trial, asking when Daddy would be happy again. Well, Daddy was happy now. Scared, confused, stepping into something that could explode at any moment, but happy. Because sometimes the best things in life came from the most unlikely places. From broken batteries and rainy highways and impossible choices that good people made when they didn't have to. Elena Morrison had been one of those good people, and Marcus was determined to be worthy of the risk she was taking. Even if it meant hiding. Even if it meant being careful. Even if it meant building their connection in shadows until enough time passed that the light wouldn't destroy them. It would be worth it. He was sure of that much. Thursday became sacred. Every week at the same cafe, the same corner booth, where the lighting was dim, and the waitress had learned not to interrupt them, Marcus and Elena built their connection in stolen hours, careful to arrive separately, to leave at different times, to never touch in public where cameras might see. It was exhausting. It was necessary. It was worth it. Sophie asked about you today, Marcus said during their 5th coffee meeting. 3 months had passed since the trial ended. Elena's cup paused halfway to her lips. What did she ask? If I'd thanked the magic hammer lady properly. She's convinced we should invite you to dinner. We can't. I know. But try explaining operational security to a 6-year-old. Elena smiled, but there was sadness behind it. What did you tell her? That judges are very busy people. that you helped us, and we're grateful, but we need to let you focus on helping other families now." Marcus paused. She said that was stupid, because magic works better when you use it more, not less. She's not wrong. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and Marcus marveled at how natural this had become. How Elena's presence had shifted from intimidating to essential. How he'd learned to read the small changes in her expression, the tightness around her eyes when she'd had a hard day, the softness in her smile when she was genuinely relaxed. "I sentenced someone today," Elena said quietly. 18-year-old kid. First offense. Caught with enough cocaine to qualify as distribution, even though everyone knows he was just buying for himself and his friends. "What did you give him?" 3 years with possibility of parole after 18 months. Mandatory minimum. My hands were tied. Elena's voice was bitter. He cried. His mother cried. And I sat there behind that bench thinking about how the system is broken, how we're destroying lives over arbitrary weight limits and mandatory sentences that don't account for context or humanity. Marcus reached across the table, covering her hand with his. In this dark corner, where no one knew them, they could afford small gestures. "You're one judge. You can't fix everything." "I know. But I can't stop thinking about the cases I could have influenced differently. Before I met you, I followed the rules without questioning them. I trusted that the system worked if everyone just did their jobs properly. But now," she looked up at him, "now I see how easily innocent people get crushed. How many Marcus Carters are sitting in prison right now because they didn't get a judge willing to demand proper evidence examination. You're being too hard on yourself. Am I? Or am I finally seeing clearly for the first time?" Marcus had no answer for that. Instead, he squeezed her hand and changed the subject. "Tell me about your father. You said he was a civil rights lawyer." Elena's expression softened immediately. "He died 6 years ago. Heart attack. Sudden. He was in court 1 minute, gone the next." She paused. "He would have loved this situation, actually. The ethical complications, the impossible choices. He spent his whole career defending people who'd been failed by the system. Would he have approved of us? Honestly, I think he would have told me I was an idiot for risking my career, and then he would have done exactly the same thing." Elena smiled. "He had this saying, 'Justice without mercy is just revenge in a fancy robe.' He believed the law was supposed to serve people, not the other way around." "Sounds like a good man." "The best. He raised me alone after my mother died. I was 8. He worked impossible hours, but never missed a school play, never forgot a birthday. He taught me that being strong meant being kind, especially to people who couldn't be kind back." Marcus heard the echo of his own mother in those words. "My mom said something similar. That character shows up when nobody's watching." "They would have liked each other, I think. Your mother and my father." "Yeah, I think so too." They talked for another hour before Elena checked her watch and grimaced. "I have to go. Early docket tomorrow. Same time next week. Always." But as Elena stood to leave, Marcus caught her wrist gently. "Hey, thank you." "For what?" "For being here. For taking the risk. For—" He struggled to find words. "For seeing me as more than just a case file." Elena's eyes went soft. "Marcus, from the moment you stopped on Highway 52, you were never just a case file. You were the man who reminded me why I became a judge in the first place." She left first, as always. Marcus waited his required 15 minutes, nursing cold coffee and thinking about how strange love was when it had to hide in shadows. Because that's what this was becoming. Love. He could feel it in the way his heart jumped when Thursday approached, in the way he caught himself thinking about Elena during Sophie's bedtime stories, in the way her smile had become as necessary as breathing. But love in secret was complicated. It meant no photos together, no casual mentions to friends, no introducing Elena to Sophie, even though his daughter asked about the magic hammer lady at least once a week. It meant living half a life waiting for enough time to pass that their connection wouldn't raise questions. Marcus paid the bill and left, and he didn't notice the woman in the back corner booth who'd been watching them for the last 20 minutes. The woman who'd seen two people holding hands across a table, who'd noticed the careful way they'd arrived and left separately. The woman who happened to work at the courthouse as a clerk in the administrative office. Her name was Patricia Chen, no relation to Sophie's teacher, and she had a very good memory for faces. Especially faces that appeared in high-profile cases. And she was absolutely certain she'd just seen Judge Elena Morrison having an intimate conversation with Marcus Carter, the defendant Morrison had exonerated 3 months ago. Patricia didn't say anything that night. She went home, thought about what she'd seen, and tried to convince herself it meant nothing. Judges were allowed to have coffee with people. Marcus Carter was a free man. There was no rule against them knowing each other. But the way they'd held hands, the way they'd looked at each other, the careful choreography of their arrivals and departures, that suggested something more than casual acquaintance. Patricia knew she should report it. There were protocols for potential judicial misconduct. But she also knew what happened when you accused a judge without solid proof. Career suicide. So she waited, watched, and started paying attention. 3 weeks later, Patricia happened to be at the same cafe purely by accident, she told herself, and saw them again. Same booth, same careful arrival pattern, same intimate hand-holding. This time she took photos with her phone. Just a few. Just enough to document what she was seeing. Just in case. Marcus had no idea they'd been photographed. He sat across from Elena, talking about Sophie's upcoming school play, and he was completely unaware that their secret was starting to unravel. "She's playing a tree," Marcus said, laughing. "Out of 30 kids, Sophie got cast as tree number 3. She's devastated. Trees are important. Forests need them." "That's what I said. She told me trees are boring and she wanted to be the princess." Elena smiled. "Bring her to my chambers sometime. I'll show her my law books. Tell her that judges start as trees, too. We stand quietly in the forest, supporting the system until we grow tall enough to matter." She'd love that, but we can't. "I know." Elena's smile faded. "How much longer do we have to hide?" "You said a year, maybe 2. "I know what I said. But sitting here talking about your daughter's school play while pretending we barely know each other, it's getting harder." Marcus felt the same frustration. What if we just told people? What if we came clean about meeting on Highway 52 before the trial? Then every decision I made in your case gets scrutinized. Every ruling questioned. Richard Brennan's lawyers would appeal, claim judicial bias, demand a retrial. Your exoneration could be overturned. But the forensic evidence doesn't matter if the judge who ordered it is proven to have personal bias. Marcus, I violated judicial ethics. I should have recused myself the moment I recognized you. If that comes out before enough time has passed, everything I did to save you could be used to destroy you instead. Marcus leaned back, feeling trapped. So, we just keep hiding. For now. Until the case is old enough that our connection looks like something that developed after, not before. And if someone finds out anyway? Elena's jaw tightened. Then I lose my career and you possibly face a retrial. Those are the stakes. That's what we're protecting against. They sat in heavy silence. Finally, Marcus said, "Maybe we should stop. Maybe this is too risky." "Do you want to stop?" "No. God, no. But I don't want to be the reason you lose everything either." Elena reached across the table, taking both his hands in hers. "Marcus, listen to me. I made my choice when I pushed open that courtroom door. I knew the risks then, and I know them now. You're not forcing me into anything. I'm here because I want to be. Even if it costs you. Even then." But the fear in her eyes suggested she knew the cost might be coming due sooner than either of them wanted. Patricia Chen sat in Samuel Garrett's office 2 days later, her hands shaking slightly as she laid the photos on his desk. "I think we have a problem." Samuel picked up the first photo. Judge Elena Morrison and Marcus Carter, hands clasped across a table, looking at each other with unmistakable intimacy. "When was this taken?" Last Thursday. But I saw them together 3 weeks ago too. Same cafe, same booth, same behavior. Samuel flipped through the other photos, his expression growing darker. Did they see you? No. I was careful. How long has this been going on? I don't know. But Judge Morrison exonerated Carter 4 months ago. If they've been meeting since then, or before then. Samuel's voice was grim. Elena requested Carter's case specifically. She pushed for forensic examination that had already been denied. She went after the prosecution harder than I've ever seen her go after anyone. You think she knew him before the trial? I think we need to find out. Samuel gathered the photos carefully. Patricia, I need you to keep this quiet. No gossip, no speculation. Can you do that? Yes, sir. After Patricia left, Samuel sat alone in his office, staring at the photos and feeling something heavy settle in his chest. He'd mentored Elena for years, watched her rise from nervous associate judge to confident jurist. He'd been proud of her. Now, he might have to destroy her career. Because if Elena Morrison had presided over Marcus Carter's case while having a personal relationship with him, or worse, if that relationship predated the trial, it was judicial misconduct. Career-ending, possibly criminal judicial misconduct. Samuel picked up his phone, then set it down. He needed more information before he confronted Elena. Needed to understand exactly what was happening before he made accusations he couldn't take back. So he did what good judges do, he investigated. Marcus noticed the change in Elena during their next Thursday meeting. She was distracted. Her responses delayed, her smile forced. What's wrong? Nothing, just a long week. Elena. She looked up at him, and Marcus saw fear in her eyes. Real, bone-deep fear. Samuel Garrett asked me yesterday if I knew you personally. Marcus's blood went cold. What did you say? I said you were a defendant I'd exonerated 4 months ago, that I'd seen you around town once or twice since then, but we weren't friends. I lied, Marcus. I looked my mentor in the eye and lied to him. Why would he ask? I don't know, but he's asking for a reason. Someone saw something. Someone knows something. And if Samuel starts digging, he'll find Highway 52. Elena nodded miserably. Your car was logged by state highway traffic cameras that night. So was mine. The timestamps will show we were both on that road at the same time. If someone looks closely enough, they'll piece it together. What do we do? I don't know. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. If I come clean now, I look guilty of everything they're suspecting. If I keep lying and they find proof, it's worse. And either way you lose your career. And you possibly lose your freedom. Richard Brennan is already serving time, but his lawyers would jump at any chance to get his conviction overturned. If my handling of your case is proven to be compromised, they'll argue yours should be too. Marcus felt panic rising in his throat. After everything, after the trial, the exoneration, the forensic proof of his innocence, he could still end up in prison because a good woman had tried to help him. We could run, he said desperately. Take Sophie, leave the state, start over somewhere else. That's not a life, and it makes you look guilty. Then what? Elena was quiet for a long time. Then we prepare for the worst. You need to talk to James Flores. Tell him everything about Highway 52, about us, about all of it. Get ahead of this before it explodes. If the forensic evidence is solid enough, your exoneration might survive, even if my involvement is questioned. What about you? I'll face whatever consequences come. Elena's voice was steady, now resolved. I made my choices knowing the risks. I don't regret them, Marcus. Even if I lose everything, I don't regret keeping you out of prison. I can't let you sacrifice yourself for me. It's not your choice to make. It never was. They sat in miserable silence until Elena finally stood to leave. Don't come next Thursday. Don't contact me unless it's through official channels. We need to create distance before this gets worse. Elena, please. Her voice broke. Please just let me try to protect you one more time. She left without looking back, and Marcus sat alone in the booth, feeling like his world was ending all over again. James Flores listened to Marcus's confession with a face that cycled through shock, anger, and resignation. You're telling me you met Judge Morrison before the trial? 3 days before. She was stranded on Highway 52. I helped fix her car. That's it. 5 minutes, maybe 10. We didn't plan it. We didn't know we'd end up in the same courtroom. But she recognized you when you appeared before her. Yes. And she didn't recuse herself. She knew if she did, I'd get Patterson. She knew I'd be convicted. Flores dropped into his chair, pressing his hands to his face. Jesus Christ, Marcus. Do you understand what you're telling me? Judge Morrison committed judicial misconduct. She compromised your entire case. She saved my life. She violated her oath. There's a difference. Is there? Marcus's voice rose. What good is an oath that sends innocent people to prison? What good are ethics that value paperwork over justice? That's not how the system works. Then maybe the system is broken. Flores was quiet for a long time. Finally, are you in a relationship with her now? We've been having coffee, talking, getting to know each other. That's a yes. I love her. The words came out fierce, desperate. I know it's complicated and wrong and violates every rule, but I love her. She's the reason Sophie still has a father, the reason I can sleep at night without nightmares about prison. She saw me, really saw me when everyone else had already decided I was guilty. Marcus, that's exactly why this is such a problem. Judge Morrison's feelings for you influenced her decisions. That's the definition of bias. Her feelings made her do her job properly, made her demand evidence examination that should have been automatic, made her actually look at my case instead of just rubber stamping the prosecution. You can't prove that's all it was. The forensic evidence proves I was innocent, which you only got because Judge Morrison bent the rules for you. Don't you see how this looks? A judge has a personal connection with a defendant, then rules favorably for him. Even if everything you did was legal, even if the evidence is solid, the process was compromised. Marcus felt despair rising. So what do I do? Pray that whoever's investigating doesn't find proof of your relationship. Pray that the connection looks coincidental instead of causal. And for God's sake, stop seeing Judge Morrison. Every coffee date, every conversation, every moment you spend together makes this worse. I can't just abandon her. You might have to. Because right now the best way to protect her career is to make it look like there's nothing between you. Marcus drove home, feeling hollowed out. Flores was right. He knew Flores was right. But the thought of cutting Elena out of his life, of letting her face consequences alone, felt like betrayal. Sophie was drawing at the kitchen table when he got home, markers spread everywhere. Daddy, look. I made another picture for the magic hammer lady. Marcus looked at the drawing. Elena, in judge's robes, standing between a small figure labeled Me and a larger figure labeled Daddy, with a bright sun overhead and the words "Thank you for fixing things" in crooked letters. That's beautiful, baby. Can we give it to her, please? Not right now. Why not? How did you explain adult complications to a 6-year-old? How did you say, because showing gratitude might destroy the woman who saved us? Because sometimes grown-ups have to be careful about things. That's a dumb reason. Yeah, sweetheart, it really is. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Marcus sat alone in his kitchen and made a decision. If Elena was going to face consequences for helping him, he wouldn't let her face them alone. He'd tell the truth, all of it. About Highway 52, about the coffee dates, about falling in love with the woman who'd saved his life. He'd take whatever punishment came. Retrial, prison, whatever. But he wouldn't let Elena be destroyed while he stayed silent. It was the right thing to do, even if it cost him everything. Samuel Garrett confronted Elena in her chambers on a Monday morning, and he didn't waste time with pleasantries. I need you to tell me the truth. Do you have a personal relationship with Marcus Carter? Elena felt her carefully constructed world start to crumble. Define personal relationship. Don't play semantic games with me, Elena. I've known you too long. She met his eyes steadily. Yes. Marcus and I have been seeing each other. Having coffee, talking, getting to know each other. Since when? This was it. The moment of truth. Elena took a breath. Since about 2 weeks after his case was dismissed. It was a lie, but it was a necessary lie. One more lie to protect the man who'd shown her what real integrity looked like. And before the trial. Did you know him before you presided over his case? Elena forced herself to hold Samuel's gaze. No. Another lie. The biggest one yet. Samuel studied her for a long moment, and Elena knew he didn't believe her. You specifically requested Carter's case. Why? Because Morrison had denied basic forensic examination. Because the evidence looked questionable. Because I thought the defendant deserved better than a rubber stamp conviction. Because you cared about him personally. I cared about doing my job properly. Elena, Samuel's voice softened. I want to believe you, but I have photos of you and Carter holding hands in a cafe. I have testimony that you've been meeting regularly for months. I have traffic camera footage that shows both your cars on Highway 52 the same night 3 days before his trial. So I'm going to ask you one more time, and I need you to think very carefully before you answer. Did you have any contact with Marcus Carter before you presided over his case? The room seemed to contract around Elena. This was it. The moment where she either came clean or committed fully to the lie. She thought about Marcus, about Sophie, about the forensic evidence that proved beyond doubt that Marcus was innocent. She thought about her father saying, "Justice without mercy is just revenge in a fancy robe." And she made her choice. Yes, Elena said quietly. I met Marcus Carter on Highway 52 3 days before his trial. My car broke down. He stopped to help. We spoke for maybe 10 minutes total. He fixed my battery, refused payment, and left. That was the full extent of our contact before the trial. Samuel closed his eyes. Why didn't you recuse yourself? Because I read his case file and saw that he was innocent. Because I knew if I recused myself, he'd get Patterson and be convicted despite the evidence. Because sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules. That's not your decision to make. Then whose decision is it? The system's. The system was failing him, Samuel. The previous judge was too busy to care. The prosecution was relying on forged documents. Marcus Carter was about to lose his daughter and spend 7 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. And I was supposed to step aside because we'd had a 10-minute conversation on a highway. Yes, that's exactly what you were supposed to do. Then the system is more broken than I thought. Samuel stood, his face weary. I have to report this. You understand that. There will be an investigation. The State Judicial Conduct Board will review every decision you made in Carter's case. You'll likely be censured at minimum, possibly disbarred. I know. Was it worth it? Elena thought about Marcus walking out of the courtroom a free man. About Sophie drawing pictures of the magic hammer lady. About building something real with someone who understood that character mattered more than convenience. Yes, she said firmly. It was worth it. After Samuel left, Elena sat alone in her chambers and waited for her world to end. She'd known this was coming, had felt it approaching like a storm on the horizon. But knowing something is coming doesn't make it easier when it finally arrives. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Flores told me to stay away from you. I'm not going to. Whatever happens, we face it together. Elena felt tears sting her eyes. She typed back. You have to. For Sophie. Promise me you'll protect her first. His response came immediately. I promise I'll protect both of you. But Elena knew better. You couldn't protect everyone. Sometimes you had to choose. And if it came down to her career or Marcus's freedom, there was no choice at all. She'd made that decision the moment she'd recognized him in the courtroom. She'd make it again. The State Judicial Conduct Board scheduled Elena's hearing for 3 weeks out, which meant 3 weeks of watching her entire career dissect itself in slow motion. The news broke on a Wednesday. Local paper first, then the evening broadcast, then social media, where everyone had an opinion about judicial ethics and none of them knew what they were talking about. Judge under investigation for alleged bias in high-profile case. The headline read, and beneath it was Elena's official courthouse photo next to a grainy image of her and Marcus at the cafe. Marcus saw it on his phone during his lunch break at the hardware store. His hands started shaking so badly he had to sit down. "You okay, man?" His co-worker Derek leaned against the shelf. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine. Just need a minute." But he wasn't fine. He was watching the woman he loved get crucified for saving his life, and there was nothing he could do about it. His phone rang. Flores. "Have you seen the news?" "Yeah." "Don't talk to reporters, don't make statements, don't do anything except show up for work and take care of Sophie. The board's investigation will include you. They'll want to interview you about your relationship with Judge Morrison." "I'll tell them the truth." "The truth is going to make everything worse, Marcus. The truth is that she met you before the trial and didn't recuse herself. That's judicial misconduct regardless of how innocent the meeting was. So we just let them destroy her. We let the process work. The forensic evidence in your case is ironclad. Your innocence isn't in question. What's in question is whether Judge Morrison's personal feelings influenced her decisions. They did. She admitted it. She saw me as a person instead of a case number, and that made her actually do her job properly. That's bias. That's literally the definition of judicial bias." Marcus ended the call and sat in the hardware store break room feeling helpless. This was his fault. All of it. If he'd just kept driving that night on Highway 52, Elena would still be a respected judge instead of facing disbarment. But Sophie would be in foster care, and he'd be in prison. The cost-benefit analysis made his head hurt. That night, Sophie asked the question he'd been dreading. "Daddy, why is the magic hammer lady on TV?" Marcus had tried to keep the news away from her, but kids were like bloodhounds for adult stress. They sensed everything. "She's having some grown-up problems at work." "Because of us." The question was too perceptive, too accurate. Marcus pulled Sophie onto his lap, her small body warm and trusting against his chest. "Not because of us, baby, because sometimes people disagree about the right way to do things. Mrs. Chen says the magic hammer lady is in trouble for being nice to you." Marcus was going to have a conversation with Mrs. Chen about what 6-year-olds needed to hear. It's complicated. Adults always say that when they don't want to explain things. She wasn't wrong. "Okay, here's the truth. Judge Morrison helped us when we really needed it. And some people think she helped us in the wrong way. They think she should have let someone else be the judge instead. But then we wouldn't have won? Maybe not." Sophie was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, "Is she going to be okay?" "I don't know, sweetheart." "Can we help her like she helped us?" Marcus felt his throat tighten. "I'm trying to figure out how." "You should give her flowers. When someone's sad, flowers help." If only it were that simple. If only flowers could fix judicial misconduct investigations and career-ending scandals. But Sophie's suggestion gave Marcus an idea. Not flowers, but something else. Something that might actually help. The next morning, Marcus called every person who'd been helped by Judge Elena Morrison's court decisions over the past 5 years. It took him 2 days of research digging through public records and news archives, finding phone numbers and email addresses. He found the 18-year-old kid Elena had mentioned, the one she'd given 3 years for cocaine possession because mandatory minimums tied her hands. The kid's mother answered and listened to Marcus's request. "You want me to write a letter about Judge Morrison?" "Yes. Tell them what kind of judge she is. Tell them how she treated your son with dignity, even when the law required she send him to prison." Why should I help her? Because she's being investigated for caring too much, for treating defendants like people instead of numbers. And if they take her off the bench, the next judge your son gets might not be as fair. The mother was quiet. Then, I'll write the letter. Marcus made 32 more calls. He found defendants Elena had given second chances to victims she'd listened to with patience and compassion, lawyers who'd practiced in her courtroom and witnessed her integrity firsthand. He compiled their stories into a document he titled Character Witness Statements in Support of Judge Elena Morrison, and sent it to the Judicial Conduct Board with a cover letter that read, Judge Morrison is being investigated for showing mercy to a defendant she believed was innocent. If that's a crime, then our justice system has lost its way. These letters represent 5 years of decisions made with wisdom, compassion, and unwavering commitment to real justice, not just procedural correctness. Please consider them before you decide what kind of judge we lose if you remove her from the bench. He signed it, Marcus Carter, knowing that his name would probably hurt more than help, but unable to stay silent while Elena faced consequences alone. Flores called him 3 hours after the document was submitted. What the hell did you just do? I submitted character references. You just inserted yourself directly into her investigation. You made it impossible for the board to separate her relationship with you from her professional conduct. Good. Because they shouldn't be separated. Elena Morrison treated me with dignity and demanded proper evidence examination because that's who she is. Not because she owed me a favor, not because we had coffee a few times, because she's a good judge who actually cares about getting it right. Marcus. I'm not letting her take the fall alone. She saved my life. Now I'm fighting for hers. Flores sighed. You're either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. Elena found out about Marcus's character witness campaign when Samuel Garrett showed up at her door that evening. He didn't look angry, just tired like he'd aged 5 years in the past 2 weeks. Can I come in? Elena stepped aside, letting him into her small townhouse. She'd been packing boxes, preparing for the worst, assuming she'd need to move somewhere cheaper when the disbarment came through. Samuel noticed the boxes. You're giving up already. I'm being realistic. Marcus Carter just submitted 32 letters to the board defending your character. Personal testimonies from defendants, victims, attorneys, all saying you're the most fair-minded judge they've encountered. Elena's hands went still on the box she'd been taping. He did what? He's fighting for you, publicly, loudly, with the kind of loyalty that either proves your relationship is genuine or proves he's trying to manipulate the investigation. It's genuine. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Samuel, everything about my relationship with Marcus is genuine. I'm not being blackmailed. I'm not being manipulated. I'm just in love with a defendant you ruled favorably for. I know. I can see it. Elena sank onto her couch, suddenly exhausted. I should have recused myself. I know that. I knew it then. But I couldn't watch an innocent man go to prison because the system was too lazy to look properly. The system has rules for a reason. The system sent an 18-year-old to prison for 3 years because he had the wrong amount of drugs. The system denied Marcus Carter basic forensic examination because it cost too much money. The system fails people every single day, and we're supposed to just follow the rules and pretend we don't see it happening. Elena looked up at Samuel with tears in her eyes. When did we stop being human beings who happen to be judges and become judges who only pretend to be human? Samuel sat down heavily beside her. You're not wrong about the system being broken, but you can't fix it by breaking more rules. So what should I have done? Let Marcus be convicted. You should have recused yourself and fought to reform the system another way. There is no other way. You know that as well as I do. Reform takes decades. Marcus Carter had 3 weeks. They sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Samuel said, The board meets next Friday. They'll review everything, your decisions in Carter's case, the forensic evidence, the character letters. Marcus submitted the timeline of your relationship. They'll interview both of you separately. What do you think they'll decide? Honestly, I think it depends on whether they believe your relationship influenced your judicial decisions or whether your judicial decisions led to your relationship. If it's the former, you're disbarred. If it's the latter, you might survive with a censure. Either way, my reputation is destroyed. Yes, but you'll still be a lawyer. You can rebuild. Elena thought about rebuilding. Starting over in a small practice somewhere defending the people, the system failed, fighting the same battles from a different position. Maybe that wouldn't be so bad. Maybe that was where she should have been all along. Samuel, can I ask you something? Of course. If you were in my position, if you'd met someone who reminded you why you became a judge in the first place, and then you found yourself presiding over their case, what would you have done? Samuel was quiet for a long time. 10 years ago, I would have recused myself without hesitation. The rules would have been more important than the person. And now? Now I'm not sure. I've seen too many good people get destroyed by a system that values procedure over justice. I've made too many decisions that were technically correct, but morally wrong. He looked at Elena with something like understanding. I think I would have done exactly what you did, and I think I would have regretted it and been proud of it in equal measure for the rest of my life. After Samuel left, Elena sat alone in her half-packed townhouse and let herself cry. Not for her career that was probably over regardless, but for the impossible position she'd put Marcus in, for the fact that loving her meant he had to watch her face consequences for saving him, for the reality that sometimes there were no good choices, only less terrible ones. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Flores says I'm an idiot for submitting those letters. Maybe I am, but I'd rather be an idiot fighting for you than a smart guy who stays silent. Thank you for everything you've done, no matter what happens. Elena typed back, thank you for reminding me why I became a judge. No matter what happens, that was worth it. Because it was. Even if she lost her career, even if her name became shorthand for judicial misconduct, even if she spent the rest of her life as a cautionary tale in legal ethics classes, Marcus Carter had reminded her that justice was supposed to be about people, not paperwork. That sometimes the right thing to do violated every rule in the book. And she'd rather be disbarred for caring too much than spend the rest of her life on the bench caring too little. The Judicial Conduct Board hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Friday, and Marcus insisted on being there despite Flores's protests. You're making this worse. I'm showing support. There's a difference. The board already knows you have a relationship with Judge Morrison. Showing up just emphasizes the bias they're investigating. I don't care. She stood up for me when everyone else had written me off. I'm not abandoning her now. Sophie stayed with Mrs. Chen. This wasn't something a 6-year-old needed to witness, but Marcus sat in the hallway outside the hearing room waiting. Elena arrived 30 minutes early, wearing a black suit that looked like armor. She saw Marcus immediately. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you, but here we are. Marcus. I'm not leaving. You can go in there and do what you need to do, but I'm waiting out here until it's over. Elena looked like she wanted to argue, but instead she just nodded. Thank you. I submitted a letter too. In addition to the character witnesses, I told them everything Highway 52, the coffee dates, falling in love with you. I figured if they're going to judge you, they should know the whole truth. Elena's eyes widened. You told them about Highway 52? Yes. Marcus, that makes everything I did look premeditated, like I was paying back a debt instead of doing my job. Or it makes it look like you're a human being who met someone in distress and later ensured they received fair treatment. Context matters, Elena. Let them see the full context. Before Elena could respond, the hearing room door opened and a clerk called her name. Judge Morrison, they're ready for you. Elena took a breath, squared her shoulders, and walked into the room where 5 board members sat behind a long table, prepared to decide her professional fate. The hearing lasted 4 hours. They questioned her about every decision she'd made in Marcus's case. They asked about the forensic examination, about her aggressive questioning of the prosecution, about why she'd pushed harder on this case than others. I pushed harder because the evidence was obviously questionable, and the previous judge hadn't done his job. Marcus Carter was about to be convicted based on photocopies certified by the plaintiff's own employee. That's not justice, that's laziness masquerading as efficiency. But you had a personal connection with Mr. Carter at the time you made these decisions. I had a 10-minute conversation with a stranger on a highway 3 days before I saw his name on my docket. That's not a personal connection, that's coincidence. Yet you didn't disclose this coincidence. No, because disclosing it would have forced my recusal, and Marcus Carter would have been convicted by a judge who rubber stamps 94% of prosecutions. That's not your decision to make, Judge Morrison. The system has recusal requirements for a reason. The system has a lot of requirements that don't serve justice. Mandatory minimums that destroy lives. Budget constraints that prevent proper evidence examination. Procedural rules that value form over substance. I chose justice over procedure. If that's misconduct, then I'm guilty. They asked about her relationship with Marcus now. About the coffee dates, about falling in love, about whether her feelings had influenced her decisions. My feelings made me look more carefully, made me demand the standards that should have been applied automatically. Made me see Marcus Carter as a human being with a daughter who depended on him instead of just case number 47 CR 2024. If that's bias, then I hope every judge is biased in favor of seeing defendants as people. One board member, a woman in her 60s named Margaret Chen, leaned forward. Judge Morrison, I've read the 32 character letters Mr. Carter submitted on your behalf. I've also reviewed your judicial record over the past 5 years. You have a reputation for fairness, compassion, and thorough analysis. The question we're struggling with is whether your treatment of Mr. Carter was consistent with your general approach, or whether it was exceptional treatment motivated by personal feelings. It was consistent with how I try to treat every defendant with dignity and proper evidentiary standards. The difference is that Marcus Carter reminded me why those standards matter. He reminded me that behind every case file is a real person whose life hangs in the balance. Because you cared about him personally. Because he showed me genuine kindness when I was vulnerable, and he had every reason to keep driving. Because that one interaction made me see clearly how often we fail people who deserve better from the system. Because knowing him made me a better judge, not a biased one. The board members conferred quietly among themselves. Finally, the chairman spoke. Judge Morrison, we'll deliberate and issue our decision within 2 weeks. You're dismissed. Elena stood on shaking legs and walked out of the hearing room. Marcus was waiting in the hallway, exactly where she'd left him 4 hours earlier. How did it go? I don't know. They'll decide in 2 weeks. What do you think they'll do? Elena leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. I think they'll censure me at minimum. Probably suspend me. Possibly disbar me. But at least I told them the truth. Marcus moved closer, close enough that anyone watching would know they were more than acquaintances. Whatever they decide, you're the bravest person I've ever met. I'm not brave. I'm terrified. You can be both. Brave doesn't mean you're not scared, it means you do the right thing even when you are. They stood in the hallway of the judicial building, and Elena thought about all the times she'd walked these halls feeling confident in her role, secure in her position. Now she was walking out possibly for the last time, and the man who'd inadvertently caused her downfall was the only one who made her feel like it had been worth it. Come on, Marcus said gently. Let me buy you coffee, somewhere far from here. They drove separately to a cafe on the other side of town, and for the first time in weeks, they didn't worry about who might see them. The secret was out. The investigation was underway. There was no point in hiding anymore. Sophie made you something, Marcus said, pulling a folded piece of paper from his jacket. She wanted me to give it to you after the hearing. Elena unfolded the drawing. It showed 3 stick figures holding hands, a tall woman in a black robe, a man, and a little girl. Above them, Sophie had written in careful letters, "Families are people who help each other." Elena's eyes filled with tears. She doesn't really understand what's happening, Marcus said quietly. But she knows you're in trouble, and she wanted you to know she's grateful. We both are. I might lose everything because of this. You already gave up everything for this. The only question now is whether it was worth it." Elena looked at the drawing again, at Sophie's careful letters, at the three figures holding hands like they belonged together. "It was worth it," she said firmly. "Even if they disbar me, even if I never judge another case, knowing that you and Sophie are safe, that you have a future together, that's worth more than my career." Marcus reached across the table and took her hand, and Elena didn't pull away. Let them see. Let the whole world see. She was done hiding. "When this is over, when the board makes their decision, I want you to meet Sophie properly. Not as the judge who saved her dad. As Elena. As someone I love. As someone who might want to be part of our chaotic, complicated life. You're asking me to meet your daughter. I'm asking if you want to build something real with us. Something that doesn't have to hide in dark cafes and separate arrivals. Something honest." Elena thought about what that would mean. Blending her life with Marcus's. Becoming a presence in Sophie's world. Building a family from the broken pieces of a judicial misconduct investigation. It was terrifying. It was impossible. It was everything she wanted. "Yes," she said. "When this is over, I want all of that." Marcus smiled, and Elena felt something settle in her chest. Whatever the board decided, she wouldn't face it alone. And maybe that was the real justice, not the kind dispensed from a bench, but the kind built between people who chose each other, despite impossible odds. The 2 weeks of waiting felt like 2 years. Elena went to work every day presiding over cases while knowing each one might be her last. Her colleagues treated her with careful distance, sympathetic but wary, like failure might be contagious. Marcus went to work at the hardware store, helped Sophie with homework, and counted down the days until Elena's fate would be decided. On day 13, Sophie asked if the magic hammer lady was going to be okay. "I hope so, baby. Can we pray for her?" Marcus wasn't particularly religious, but he knelt beside Sophie's bed that night and listened as his 6-year-old prayed for the judge who'd saved their family. "Dear God, please help the magic hammer lady keep her job. She's really good at fixing things, and lots of people need her. Also, Daddy loves her, even though he thinks I don't notice. So please make everything okay? Amen." Marcus's throat was too tight to speak. He just hugged Sophie and hoped someone was listening. On day 14, the Judicial Conduct Board's decision arrived by courier at Elena's chambers. Her hands shook as she opened the envelope. She read the first paragraph 3 times before the words made sense. Then she sat down hard in her chair and tried to remember how to breathe. The decision letter was 3 pages long, but the first paragraph told Elena everything she needed to know. After careful review of the evidence and testimony presented, the State Judicial Conduct Board finds that Judge Elena Morrison exercised poor judgment in failing to disclose a prior meeting with defendant Marcus Carter. However, given the brief and incidental nature of this contact, the overwhelming forensic evidence supporting Mr. Carter's innocence and Judge Morrison's otherwise exemplary record, the board has determined that a formal censure is the appropriate sanction. Judge Morrison will remain on the bench, but will be required to complete additional ethics training and will be subject to enhanced oversight for a period of 12 months. Elena read it again, then a third time. Not disbarred, not suspended, censured. She was keeping her career. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone when she called Marcus. He answered on the first ring. "What did they say?" "Censure, just censure. I'm staying on the bench." The sound Marcus made was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "You're serious?" "They said my judgment was poor, but my intentions were clear. That the forensic evidence proved your innocence, regardless of my personal feelings. That my record of fair decisions over 5 years outweighed one ethical lapse." "Elena, that's God, that's incredible." "They cited the character letters you submitted. All 32 of them. They said the testimony about my commitment to fairness from defendants, victims, and attorneys carried significant weight in their decision. So I didn't make it worse. You saved me, again. Elena felt tears streaming down her face. Marcus, you saved me the same way I saved you. I think we saved each other. They stayed on the phone in silence for a long moment, just breathing, just processing the fact that the worst hadn't happened, that somehow impossibly they'd survived. Can I see you? Marcus asked finally. Right now. I don't want to wait. Come to my place. I don't care who sees anymore. Marcus arrived 20 minutes later, and the moment Elena opened her door, he pulled her into his arms. She collapsed against his chest, and they stood in her doorway, holding each other, while months of fear and tension finally released. I thought I'd lost everything, Elena whispered. I thought loving you was going to cost me everything. Would you have done it differently if you could go back? Elena pulled back enough to look at him. No, not a single thing. I'd stop on Highway 52 again. I'd fight for your innocence again. I'd fall in love with you again. All of it. Marcus kissed her, then deep and desperate and full of relief. When they finally broke apart, both were crying. Sophie wants to meet you, Marcus said. The real you, not the magic hammer lady from court, but Elena, the woman I'm in love with, the woman I want in our lives. Elena's heart stuttered. I want that too, but Marcus, are you sure? After everything that just happened, the investigation, the publicity, the scrutiny, are you sure you want to tie your life to mine? Elena, my life has been tied to yours since the moment you demanded forensic examination in that courtroom, since the moment you saw me as a person instead of a case number, since the moment you risked everything because you couldn't watch an innocent man suffer. I'm not scared of scrutiny. I'm scared of losing you. You're not going to lose me. Then let me bring Sophie tomorrow. Let her meet the woman who saved her father. Let us start building something real. Elena nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Tomorrow. Tomorrow she'd meet the 6-year-old who'd drawn pictures of the magic hammer lady. Tomorrow she'd step into Marcus's life completely not as a judge or a secret or a scandal, but as a woman who loved him. Tomorrow she'd start becoming part of a family. That night Elena couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about meeting Sophie, about what a 6-year-old would think of her, about whether she was ready to be part of a child's life. She'd never had kids, never been married. Her career had been everything, and now she was contemplating building a life that included a first grader who believed in magic hammers and drew pictures where everyone held hands. She was terrified. She was excited. She was more sure of this than she'd been of anything in years. Marcus picked Sophie up from school the next day and drove straight to Elena's townhouse. His daughter bounced in the back seat, her yellow backpack decorated with princess stickers, her excitement barely contained. Is this where the magic hammer lady lives? Her name is Elena, and yes, this is her home. Does she have the magic hammer here? The gavel stays at the courthouse, baby. Sophie looked disappointed. I wanted to see it. Maybe she'll show it to you sometime, but today we're just meeting her as a person, not as a judge. Can you remember that? I'm 6 daddy, not a baby. I can remember things. Marcus smiled despite his nerves. Sophie had been coaching him all week about what to say to Elena, what kind of flowers to bring, whether he should wear his nice shirt or his regular shirt. She'd taken her role as relationship advisor very seriously. What if she doesn't like me? Sophie had asked last night, and Marcus's heart had broken a little. She's going to love you. How could she not? Now walking up to Elena's door with Sophie's small hand gripped tightly in his, Marcus prayed he was right. Prayed that this moment would be the beginning of something beautiful, instead of the beginning of complications neither of them had anticipated. Elena opened the door before they could knock, and Marcus saw her eyes go immediately to Sophie. His daughter stared back, taking in Elena without her judge's robes, without the formal setting of a courtroom. Just a woman in jeans and a soft sweater, looking nervous and hopeful. "Hi," Elena said gently, kneeling down to Sophie's eye level. "I'm Elena. Your dad's told me a lot about you." Sophie studied her seriously. "Did he tell you I'm good at art?" "He did. He said you draw amazing pictures. I drew you lots of times, with your magic hammer and your cape." Elena smiled. "I heard about those. I'd love to see them sometime." "I brought you one." Sophie pulled a folded paper from her backpack and thrust it at Elena. "It's us. All of us together." Elena unfolded the drawing carefully. 3 stick figures holding hands, the same image she'd seen before, but this one had more detail. A house in the background. A sun with a smiley face. A dog that looked more like a potato with legs. And above it all, in Sophie's careful printing, "My family." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Sophie, this is beautiful." "You're crying. Did I make you sad?" "No, sweetheart, you made me happy. Sometimes people cry when they're really, really happy." Sophie considered this, then nodded like it made perfect sense. "Daddy cries when he's happy too. He cried a lot when you fixed everything." "Sophie," Marcus started, embarrassed. "It's okay," Elena said, looking up at him with wet eyes. "It's okay to cry when things get fixed." She stood and invited them inside, and for the next 3 hours, Marcus watched something miraculous happen. He watched Elena and Sophie orbit each other cautiously, at first, then with growing comfort. He watched his daughter explain her elaborate stuffed animal kingdom, while Elena listened with genuine interest. He watched Elena help Sophie with homework, patient and kind, treating a 6-year-old's questions with the same seriousness she'd treat any courtroom testimony. "Why do we have to learn math?" Sophie asked, frustrated with her addition worksheet. "Because math helps you understand how the world works," Elena explained. "Like in court, I have to understand numbers, how much money was stolen, how many years a sentence should be, whether the evidence adds up properly. So math is for catching bad guys. Sometimes, math is for lots of things. What do you want to be when you grow up?" Sophie didn't hesitate. "An artist, or a princess, or maybe a judge like you with a magic hammer." Elena laughed, and Marcus felt his heart expand. "Those are all excellent choices. Which one should I pick?" "You don't have to pick yet. You're 6. You have time to try everything and see what fits." "Did you always want to be a judge?" "No. When I was your age, I wanted to be a veterinarian. I loved animals." "What changed?" Elena was quiet for a moment, then said, "My dad was a lawyer who helped people who couldn't help themselves. I watched him fight for people the world had given up on, and I realized I wanted to do that too. I wanted to use words and rules to protect people who needed protecting." Sophie absorbed this seriously. "Like you protected my daddy." "Yes, like I protected your daddy." "I'm glad you did. He's a really good daddy, and it would be sad if he went away." Marcus had to excuse himself to the kitchen, then overwhelmed by the simple truth of his daughter's words. Elena found him a few minutes later, leaning against the counter trying to compose himself. "You okay?" "Yeah, just this is a lot. Good a lot. But a lot." Elena moved closer, her voice soft. "She's wonderful, Marcus. Smart and creative and so full of life. You've done an amazing job with her. We've had our struggles. There have been nights where I had no idea what I was doing, where I put her to bed and just sat on the floor crying because I was so scared I was failing her. You're not failing her. She's happy and confident and knows she's loved. That's everything. I want her to know you're loved too, by both of us." Elena took his hand. "I think she already does." They returned to the living room where Sophie had spread out her entire art portfolio across Elena's coffee table, narrating each picture with elaborate detail. "This one is a dragon, but it's a nice dragon who just wants friends. And this one is a mermaid princess who lives in a castle made of coral. And this one..." Sophie held up a recent drawing. This one is you and Daddy getting married. Marcus nearly choked. Sophie. What? She looked genuinely confused. You love her. She loves you. That's what people do when they love each other. Mrs. Chen told me. Elena was trying not to laugh. Your Mrs. Chen is very wise. So are you going to marry him? Sophie. Marcus was mortified. You can't just ask people that. Why not? It's a reasonable question. Elena knelt down beside Sophie, her expression gentle but serious. Marriage is something grown-ups think about very carefully. Your dad and I are still getting to know each other, but I can promise you this. I care about both of you very much, and I'm not going anywhere. Sophie studied her for a long moment, then nodded decisively. Okay, but when you do marry him, I want to be the flower girl, and I want to wear yellow because yellow is the happiest color. If I marry your daddy, you'll definitely be the flower girl, in the yellowest dress we can find. Promise. I promise. Sophie threw her arms around Elena's neck, and Marcus watched the woman he loved hug his daughter back with tears in her eyes. This was what he'd hoped for. This connection, this ease, this feeling that they could be a family. But it was also terrifying. Because now there were 3 hearts involved instead of 2. 3 people who could be hurt if this fell apart. 3 lives tangled together in a way that couldn't easily be untangled. Later, after Sophie had fallen asleep on Elena's couch, Marcus and Elena sat together in the kitchen speaking in whispers. She's going to be heartbroken if this doesn't work out, Marcus said quietly. So am I. Elena, I need you to be sure, really sure, because I can handle my own heartbreak. But if Sophie gets attached to you and then loses you... I'm not going anywhere, Marcus. I told her that, and I meant it. How can you be sure? Elena took his hands in hers. Because in the past 6 months, you and Sophie have become the most important things in my life. Because I wake up thinking about you and go to sleep thinking about her drawings. Because I've never felt this kind of certainty about anything. Not my career, not my decisions from the bench, nothing. But this, you two, I'm completely certain. Even after everything, the investigation, the censure, the fact that being with me nearly destroyed your career. Especially after all that, because it proved what matters. My career isn't everything. Justice isn't just something I do from a bench. It's something I live. And loving you, protecting you, being part of Sophie's life. That's justice too. The most important kind. Marcus kissed her, then gentle and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Sophie's sleepy voice came from the doorway. Are you kissing Mrs. Chen? Says that's how you know people are in love. Your Mrs. Chen is very smart, Elena said, not embarrassed at all. Yes, we're kissing. Is that okay with you? Sophie padded over in her socks and climbed onto Elena's lap like she'd done it 100 times before. It's okay, but next time you should kiss under mistletoe. That's more romantic. I saw it in a movie. It's not Christmas yet, baby, Marcus said, amused. We could get fake mistletoe. It counts the same. They ended up staying until almost midnight, Sophie waking periodically to join the conversation before dozing off again. By the time Marcus finally carried his sleeping daughter to the car, Elena felt like something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't just a relationship between 2 adults anymore. This was a family taking shape. The next few months were a careful dance of building their lives together while maintaining appropriate boundaries. Elena couldn't show favoritism at work, couldn't let anyone claim her personal life influenced her professional decisions. Marcus had to be mindful of his daughter's emotional attachments, had to make sure Sophie understood that Elena was separate from the courtroom magic. But slowly, steadily, they wove themselves together. Elena started coming to Sophie's school events, sitting in the audience, as Marcus's girlfriend applauding enthusiastically when Sophie played tree number 3 in the winter play. I was a good tree, Sophie said afterward, beaming. The best tree I've ever seen, Elena agreed solemnly. They had dinner together twice a week, usually at Marcus's apartment, because it was bigger and Sophie's toys were already scattered everywhere. Elena learned to navigate the chaos of a 6-year-old's bedtime routine. The negotiations about teeth brushing, the elaborate requests for water, the need for 3 specific stuffed animals arranged in precise order. "This is harder than presiding over criminal trials," Elena said one night after Sophie had asked for her 5th glass of water. "Welcome to parenthood, where every night is a battle of wills and you're never sure who's winning." "I think Sophie's winning." "Oh, Sophie's definitely winning." But Elena loved it. Loved the messiness and chaos. Loved the way Sophie would randomly announce, "I love you," in the middle of dinner. Loved the drawings that now included her in every family portrait. She loved being part of something bigger than herself. 6 months after the Judicial Conduct Board's decision, Marcus invited Elena to his apartment on a Tuesday evening. Sophie was at a sleepover, the first time they'd have the place to themselves for an entire night. "I want to talk to you about something," Marcus said after dinner. Elena's heart jumped. "That sounds ominous." "It's not. At least I hope it's not." He took her hand, his palm sweaty with nerves. "I've been thinking about the future, about what we're building here, and I realized something." "What's that?" "I don't want to date you anymore." Elena's stomach dropped. "What?" "Let me finish." Marcus was smiling now, nervous but sure. "I don't want to date you because dating suggests something temporary, something we're still figuring out. And I'm not figuring anything out anymore, Elena. I know you're the person I want to wake up next to every morning. I know Sophie adores you and needs you in her life. I know that 6 months ago I thought my life was over, and now I can't imagine my life without you in it." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Elena's breath stopped. "I'm not good at fancy speeches. I'm just a guy who fixed your car battery and somehow got lucky enough to fall in love with you. But I want to make this official. I want Sophie to stop asking when we're getting married and start planning what color dress she's wearing. I want—" "Yes." Elena interrupted, tears streaming down her face. "I haven't even asked yet." "I don't care. Whatever you're about to ask, the answer is yes." Marcus laughed, opened the box, and revealed a simple silver ring with a small diamond. "Elena Morrison, will you marry me? Will you be part of this chaotic, complicated, beautiful family we're building?" "Yes. 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, and they held each other in Marcus's tiny kitchen, both crying, both laughing, both overwhelmed by the impossible journey that had brought them here. From a broken battery on a rainy highway to a proposal in a kitchen where Sophie's drawings covered the refrigerator. From a courtroom where their eyes had met across an impossible divide to this moment where nothing divided them anymore. "Sophie's going to lose her mind when she finds out," Marcus said eventually. "She's been planning this wedding since the day she met me." "I know. She has a notebook full of ideas. Apparently, we're getting married in a castle with a dragon as the ring bearer. That seems logistically challenging." With Sophie, everything is logistically challenging. They spent the rest of the evening planning, dreaming, imagining the life they'd build together. Elena would keep her townhouse for now, but eventually move in with Marcus and Sophie. They'd look for a bigger place, something with a yard where Sophie could play, and they could get the dog she'd been begging for. They'd tell Sophie in the morning, let her be the first to know that her drawing of "my family" was becoming real. They'd plan a small wedding, nothing fancy, just the people who mattered. James Flores would be best man. Mrs. Chen would probably cry through the entire ceremony. Samuel Garrett would attend, despite his reservations, because he'd come to respect what Elena and Marcus had built from impossible circumstances. And Sophie would be the flower girl in the yellowest dress anyone had ever seen. When Sophie found out the next morning, she screamed so loud the neighbors probably called the police. "I knew it. I told Mrs. Chen. I told everyone. Inside voice, baby." Marcus tried, but Sophie was beyond inside voice. "Can I call Grandma Chen? Can I tell my teacher? Can I tell everyone in my whole entire class? Yes to all of that. Sophie threw herself at Elena, nearly knocking her over. I'm going to be the best flower girl ever. I'm going to practice walking slow and throwing petals perfectly, and I won't trip even once. I know you will, sweetheart. And after you marry Daddy, you'll be my mom, right? Like a real mom. Elena's throat tightened. She looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. If that's what you want, Sophie, I would be honored to be your mom. I want that. I've always wanted a mom, and you're the best one I could ask for because you're magic. I'm not magic, sweetheart. Yes, you are. You fixed everything when everything was broken. That's magic. Maybe she was right. Maybe there was magic in stopping for strangers. Magic in demanding justice when the system failed. Magic in building families from impossible circumstances. Magic in choosing love even when it violated every rule in the book. The wedding happened 4 months later on a bright Saturday in June. Small ceremony, just 40 people held in a garden that Sophie declared was almost as good as a castle. Elena wore a simple white dress. Sophie wore yellow, so much yellow that she practically glowed. Marcus wore a suit that actually fit him this time, and when Elena walked down the aisle, his eyes filled with tears. James Flores performed the ceremony he'd gotten ordained online specifically for this purpose. Mrs. Chen cried exactly as predicted. Samuel Garrett sat in the back row looking pleased despite himself. And when the officiant asked if anyone objected to this union, Sophie stage whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "If anyone says anything, I'll fight them. I've been waiting for this my whole life." The guests erupted in laughter, and Marcus and Elena exchanged vows through tears and smiles. "I promise to stop for strangers," Marcus said. "To fix what's broken when I can. To raise Sophie with you as partners, as parents, as people who believe that character matters more than convenience." "I promise to fight for justice," Elena said. "Not just from a bench, but here in our home, in our family. I promise to love both of you with everything I have, to see you not as case files or obligations, but as the people who reminded me why humanity matters." They kissed, and Sophie cheered louder than anyone, waving her bouquet of yellow roses like a victory flag. At the reception, Sophie gave a speech that she'd apparently prepared with Mrs. Chen's help. "My daddy says that magic isn't real, but I know better. Magic is when broken things get fixed. Magic is when people who need each other find each other even when it's really, really hard. Magic is when a judge uses her hammer to save people instead of just banging it for no reason. My daddy and Elena have magic, and now we're a family. Thank you for coming to my family's wedding." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Later, as they danced Marcus with Elena Sophie between them holding both their hands, Elena thought about how strange life was. How one night on a rainy highway had led to this moment. How stopping to help a stranger had become the most important decision of her life. She thought about her father's words, "Justice without mercy is just revenge in a fancy robe." She'd shown mercy. She'd bent rules. She'd risked everything. And in return, she'd gained everything. A husband who understood that kindness was its own form of courage. A daughter who believed in magic and drew pictures where everyone held hands. A family built from broken pieces that somehow fit together perfectly. Sometimes the right thing to do violated every rule in the book. Sometimes justice required impossible choices. Sometimes love meant risking everything for someone you'd just met. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, the universe gave you exactly what you needed exactly when you needed it. Elena Morrison had spent years dispensing justice from behind a bench. But the real justice, the kind that mattered, was this dancing in a garden with a man who'd shown her kindness and a child who'd shown her joy. Building a family from the ruins of a scandal, proving that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose love over procedure. She'd made her choice the moment she'd pushed open that courtroom door. She'd make it again every day for the rest of her life.